I know, I wish I had a gavel. Welcome, everybody. I'm Adam Tope, the chairman of ANC 3F. We decided to invite DC Water to this second meeting to talk about their plans because the last meeting was during our ANC meeting. I'm very pleased at the huge turnout here. I'm just going to go turn it on over to John Lyle of DC Water, and he can start introducing everyone.
Thank you very much. I'm John Lyle. I'm the Chief of External Affairs at DC Water, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I know why you're here. There's a lot of information has been put out about this project that, for the most part, is a little premature. And one of the things you're going to hear over and over again tonight is that no decisions have been made. We are very early in this project and the planning for this project. There are no plans. There's no conceptual drawings to show you. And our engineering team is going to walk you through all of the different options that are out there that we're looking at, but we haven't decided on any of them. And so it's very early, but we understand, based on what has been shared I know in the community and through some media, that I understand why you're concerned. I've seen the reports, and so we're going to try to make sure that you leave here tonight with good information about where we are in this process and how we're going to move forward. And I want you to keep in mind that we're probably about 2 years out from construction if we're lucky. So again, it's very early. But and I also, before I turn it over to Jody Russell, who's our planning manager, I want to introduce Emmanuel Briggs. Emmanuel heads up our outreach team and at DC Water, and his cards were distributed in the back, so if you have any concerns after this meeting or any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact us, and we'll get that information to you. I also obviously want to acknowledge the council member, Mary Che, who's here, and thank you very much for coming. I don't know if you want to say anything, or you. That's what we're going to do. We're going to work on it. Let me introduce Jody Russell. Thank you all very much.
I'm going to try to get the hang of holding a microphone that doesn't project while speaking to you. A little bit of coordination. First of all, we're very happy with the turnout because the greatest value that you can provide us is to give you your input often and early. And so this is very early, and we need to hear what you're thinking. It's of no benefit to us to hold your thoughts until we're at a later stage in the process and have invested more time in engineering analysis. So it's great that we have your turnout. So I'm Jody Russell. I manage the planning within the Department of Engineering of both the water and sewer system. It's a job that I consider myself very privileged to be able to do. So I get out to the communities frequently. Our program is greatly ramping up to renew the water and sewer system within DC to make a reinvestment in our infrastructure. One of the things that you'll hear is that many of you have read is that, the average age of our sewer system is about, or median age is about 89 years old. In particular, the sewers in the project areas that we're talking about were built in 1908. They are over 100 years old, and they have long outlived their useful life. So we have to do something responsible as far as the sewers go. I'll get into that a little bit more. I do want to recognize a couple of other things. One is I'd like to recognize our partners in this project, particularly National Park Service. Nick Bartolomeo is here. Bill Yeaman is here. Do we have anyone else from the National Park Service? We put a great deal of pride in building a partnership with the National Park Service where we listen to each other and we respect that the We are dealing with a prized natural resource. And so I do want you to know we've probably had so far on this project about a dozen to 15 preliminary meetings with the Park Service, including walkthroughs so we could get their input on sensitive resources in the park. And not only in this park, but we're very unique at DC Water in that we both deal with the National Capital Region and every park in the region. So that's CNO and Malls and Monuments and Presidential Park and GW Parkway and Rock Creek Park and Anacostia Parks. These were quite unique. We take a great deal of pride in building that kind of win-win and cooperative partnership with all of the parks. The other thing is DDOE. I saw Stephen Reiling here. Stephen, anybody else from DDOE? Okay, so we also meet monthly on a regular basis with the folks at DDOE who have an interest in the restoration of DC Department of Environment. So that we can, because we have so much infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, because of gravity that runs in stream valleys, it's very important for us to, rather than, and DDOE is spending a lot of time and effort in stream restoration, it's very important with us that we align, that we meet all the time to align our greatest sewer priorities in terms of when we rank sewer priorities. We're talking about where are sewers the most deteriorated, that are the most vulnerable to failure. If we can align our priorities for sewers in greatest need of rehabilitation, excuse my back to folks or my side, with the DDOE's priority for stream valleys that they're most interested in rehabilitating, we can really do a great job in terms of meeting public and environmental needs in a cooperative, least expensive way. Just so you know, we meet monthly. These folks are truly our partners, the agencies that are here, and it's important for you to know that. So the need of the sewers, I commented that, these sewers built in 1908. And what you're going to hear is we're going to educate you tonight on, we have essentially, with the park, worked on evaluating every possible alternative and technology for rehabilitating the sewers. So all we're going to be doing tonight is presenting them to you, different ways. You know, you can rehabilitate the sewer, you can relocate the sewer. So that's what we're going to be talking to you about with our assessment of the pros and cons of each. We've looked at the depths of the sewers, we've looked at the condition and whether there are bends in the sewers to see what technologies are practical, okay? And that's what we're going to be laying out for you tonight. What I do want you to give some thought to, I've been managing water and sewer in the public sector, water and sewer work for the last 35 years. And what I can tell you is that when we go through a process like this, we can plan very carefully. We can tag every tree, we can, maneuver for the least impact very carefully, so that there is the least disruption overall. When there is an emergency and the sewer fails, we don't have that luxury. And that is the most destructive of all alternatives in my lots of years, and I think we all have to recognize that if there is a failure of the sewers, a lot of these sewers hang out, we'll show you, hang out across the stream, and all they need in a large storm is for a tree to fall on them or a tree to come rushing down the river, and it can easily knock out one of those pipes, spewing millions of gallons of raw sewage in a matter of moments. So we would have to get to that right away to protect public health and the environment under an unplanned scenario. I don't think anybody here wants that to happen. So just want to emphasize that. We want to know tonight, when we present these various alternatives, what you're concerned about, what you like, what you don't like. If your greatest concern, for example, is a project that will involve the blocking of traffic on a certain street, you might be a business owner, you have other concerns, then we need to know that. If your greatest concern is the tree removal, then we need to know that. If your greatest concern is odors or noise from a potential pumping station, we will try to quantify and help you understand to the degree that we can. We're happy to ask your questions, answer all the questions you have in due time. This is the beginning of the process. We will be coming back to you to tell you more, once we get your input. So I want to comment on one other aspect, which is the closing date for comments. There is no closing date for comments at this point. The comment period will be continuing, and then, in fact, when we get to the point that we have a draft EA that is circulated for public review, there will be a formal NEPA, I think 60-day review process. At this time, we have informally published, so to speak, that we'd like your comments on what you hear at this meeting in mid-August. Why? Again, the early and often input helps us get back to you to say, this is what we heard from you. And so we'd like to set a time frame by which we get that level of input. That is not official in the way, and it does not imply in any way, shape, or form that we're cutting off consideration. This is the beginning of the process, and no decisions have been made, okay? I also want to let you know, so the people that we have here tonight, John let you know, he and Emmanuel are here. We work with them often in engineering to help you best understand the project. We also have Will Elledges here. Will is a supervisor in planning. He is what I consider a sewer geek, loves keeping sewer. I consider him an expert in sewer rehab and design, and we are really, really privileged to have him. You don't have consultants here presenting to you tonight. We are all DC Water staff whose full-time job is to look out for what is in the best interests of DC, the resident, and our ratepayers. That's what we do every day when we come into work. We say, how is it that we're going to work today in a way to do what's best for the future of the city and for the ratepayers? So I think in the past you would have seen our consulting teams here, and that's not the case now. Jessica DeMoise is the project manager that works for Will. So she is the day-to-day reviewing the deliverables, and we do have the team of Hazen and Sawyer, who is working on concept designs with Strawn Environmental, who is the environmental sub-consultant on the process, and they are doing the things like the wetlands evaluations, the forest stand delineations, the rare and endangered species, cultural resources, archaeological, historical, and so on. They're doing the research on all of those resources within potential limits of disturbance of any of the alternatives that we're looking at. So I think I've covered a lot of the things. Yes.
Ms. Russell, could you just tell us what's the diameter of the sewage pipe you're here to talk about, and how much sewage flows through this system?
We will be getting, so will give you a full rundown of where these pipes, if you can hold off on that, we will be getting to all these details. Our goal is so that you understand. Okay? We would like to make ourselves get into work at 6:30 in the morning, and it's Will's 15th anniversary tonight, and hasn't seen. We would like to be out of here respectfully at 9 o'clock. We have to drive home safely and get some sleep. But whatever comments that you do have, we're eager to have them. Okay. So with that in mind, are there any questions on anything that I've discussed or? Okay. So we are in the process of developing an environmental assessment whereby we identify with the park, that's their environmental assessment, they're having us develop it on the park's behalf. And in that environmental assessment, that's where we are identifying all of the resources that could be affected by a range of alternatives. That environmental assessment lists what the many alternatives are, and so we have drafted that. It's in the park's hands. It makes no decisions or recommendations. It just says, here are the possibilities, here are the resources affected by each of these possibilities. Yes, please.
Actually, just to clarify, where we're going is where the environmental concept requires us to do the assessment for any major action on the soil. And where we are in what's called the NEPA process is what's called public scoping. We're presenting ideas, DC Water is presenting ideas of what they want to accomplish with what they think they can do in the park, and they're getting public feedback. Whether it's an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, which is the next level up, what's called environmental compliance, they're yet to be determined. They're really in the phase of just looking at options, getting public feedback. We'll make a determination on what vehicle we use once we go through the process.
You say we. Where's everything located?
Sure. My name is Nick Bartolomeo. I'm the Chief of Resources Management at Rock Creek Park. And Rock Creek Park manages really a lot of the Wall Park resources like that.
Can I have your direct dial phone number, email?
We've got contact information on the very last
Beg your pardon?
We've got contact information on the very last
She's the project. She's always been the
Well,
your phone number.
well, we have what would be most beneficial so that we can manage the water and sewer system within the district is we'd like comments to go through our external affairs office, and then we will in planning provide technical support so that they can keep the information consistent and timely.
This is a question of jurisdiction. Who makes the final decision? I don't know anything about what that means. Is it the Park Service, or is it the DC government, or is it a joint decision? And at the end of the road, who makes the decision in terms of which alternative?
Well, Nick, I'll let you comment on that.
Well, to come to the decision point again, let me just reiterate what Jody said, and that we are cooperating, we are working together. This is, as Jody said, our process because it's federal land, but it's DC Water's process. So we're just starting the process. Eventually, it is our decision. National Park Service.
My next question, maybe we hold off on more questions so that I can present the information about the project. Is that okay?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for.
On that note, there are. Is it okay if we wait?
Well, I'd like to know who makes the determination. Are they the EIS, the municipality? And at what point will we know, how many trees does it take? 600, 800, 1,000? How do you make that
We're
decision?
still making that determination. I mean, we're just gathering information right now, yes. So it's going to take a little while before we can come to the decision whether it's going to be an environmental assessment
We've got about an hour left. The presentation part of it is about a half an hour, so we'll give half of our time for questions since we've got time to do that. So if anybody has questions as we're going along, there are 3 by 5 cards that you can circulate. Anything you can
The public comment card for each chair, if you need us to go ahead and that. So if you have questions for the presentation, go ahead and write those down. And Will, just as a reminder to everybody, you can comment online on this. I mean, that really is the preferred way to do it. And that's the part that is like the website. I can see me afterwards. I can tell you where to go.
You can click on the last slide.
But in terms of questions tonight, if you have questions, write them down. We'll come and collect those when the presentation's done, and we can go with the question. And we'll be here as soon as we can until 9. And then if there's further questions, we'll collect those until we get back to the spot.
I see hands, but I really do want to. We'll actually talk about how you can get a copy.
Thank you so much.
So my name is William Elledge. I'll be talking about the technical aspects of this. I actually kind of pride myself that she calls me an engineering geek. It really is what I enjoy doing. William Elledge. William Elledge. Last name's Elledge. I'm the supervisor of projects and interagency planning. I report to Jody. So the very first question we should really ask is, why does this project even exist? Why are we even here? And Jody really talked about that. The median age of a sewer in DC is 89 years old. These sewers are older than that, about 105 years old. They're old, they're falling apart, they're cracks, fractures, holes, roots, leaks. Important to note that it's leaking in, not leaking out. So the sewers are in need of repair, replacement, rehabilitation, relocation, some combination of that. But that's what we're trying to figure out. And to reiterate this, John said it, Jody said it, no decisions have been made. We're here obviously collecting comments. We're going to go through a series of concepts and options that we have, just the universe of engineering possibilities, and we want to hear comments on those different concepts. We want to hear your comments, concerns, questions about those concepts. Purpose of the meeting, we'll give you background, purpose, and need. Talk about the concepts, talk about the issues related to some of those concepts, and then, like I said, the second half, we really want to focus on hearing your questions, comments, and concerns. So the outline of the presentation will focus on 3 things: overview, purpose and need, and then concepts. The first 2 will be rather short. First, overview. I think everybody's probably familiar with the location, but it is Glover Park and Soapstone Park. The pictures we'll be showing in the presentation tonight are all from Soapstone, since this was at the request of 3F, but the project concerns, issues, and problems and needs are all very similar for both parks. So in Glover Park, the sewer line runs really right down the center of the park, close to the stream, from Van Ness all the way down to Foxhall. In Soapstone, it runs basically from Albemarle, just east of Connecticut, along the stream all the way to Broad Branch. Existing conditions, what you see here is not a sewer line, it's a park. Personal opinion, it's quite a beautiful park. That's the existing condition. Work we've completed to date, CCTV, it's a fascinating kind of thing. It's a remote control robot that we can send in the pipes with the camera. It can pan, it can tilt, it can do all kinds of things. And we can look at all the defects remotely inside the pipe. Most of you probably haven't seen the inside of a sewer. We'll fix that tonight. We've brainstormed all the different creative concepts we can come up with. We've done conceptual design on some of those. We've established an LOD, which is a limit of disturbance, for those multiple concepts. Site visits to evaluate the constructability and impacts. As you can imagine, if what we want to do is drive a giant piece of construction equipment in there, it's going to have significant impacts. It would also probably not really be constructible. So we have to pay attention to what can even fit in there, as well as the impacts. We've met with specialty contractors to reduce the limits of disturbance. There's kind of a standard operating procedure, a normal way of doing things that takes up a certain amount of space. There are specialty contractors that can do it in smaller space. We've started the Section 106, that's for historic preservation. We've done archaeological research, documented that in a draft EA, wetlands delineation, forest stand delineation, including a count of trees greater than 18 inches in diameter. and we've done the research on the rare, threatened, and endangered species. On to purpose and need. 7 purposes that we have listed. Obviously, we're here for the sewers, but first on the list and above all, it is a park. We need to maintain the function of the park. The sewer has lived its full design life. We need to restore its structural integrity. The groundwater is higher than the pipe in several locations, and with the degradation of the pipe, that groundwater actually leaks into the pipe. And what that does is it does a couple things. All that water eventually gets to Blue Plains. And with that extra water in the pipe, it can increase the potential for sanitary sewer overflows. And there's combined sewer overflows, which you're all familiar with along the Anacostia, the Potomac, and in Rock Creek even. This would be different. This would be a sanitary sewer overflow. Much bigger problem. It's not combined with direct storm drainage. It's currently a separate sanitary sewer. So that would, our goal is to reduce that infiltration and reduce the potential for overflows. One of the things, those of you who hike the park on a regular basis, you can see the pipe. You're not supposed to be able to see sewer pipes. They're supposed to be hidden out of view, so we want to eliminate the exposed pipes. And then last but not least, obviously we have regulatory requirements. Clean Water Act does not allow us to discharge raw sewage to park. So obviously we need to meet that requirement. Related to this, the district and DC Water in partnership also have requirements to repair defective outfalls within a certain time frame as part of our MS4 permit, and that work, a handful of those outfalls are part of this project as well. Yes. So project needs, photos from Soapstone, some of you will recognize them all quite well. Starting in the top right, this is something you may not recognize, but when you walk in from the by the headwaters, the trailhead just off of Albemarle, and you first start walking in there, if you go in a little ways and you hike down to the right, and then you kind of go back towards the pond where the flow first comes out of the pipe, if you look through the left and the brush is kind of dead like it is in the winter, you can see a previous repair. To be honest, it just wasn't done very well. This is one of those things that we need to fix. Scooting down here, that bar of concrete is a sanitary sewer pipe. There's a manhole, another manhole. This one is particularly interesting. That shadow right there is looking underneath the pipe. There is nothing underneath that pipe holding it in place. The only reason it's there is because there's a manhole here and a manhole adjacent to it, and it's just spanning that distance. We need to fix that before it fails. Here's my favorite pictures, from inside the sewer. The pipe's broken. It's got holes. There it is leaking. And this one, it's tilted, so the water is flowing is obviously in the bottom of the pipe, but the camera's tilted, so it looks a little sideways. What you see right there is a crack running along at about 11 o'clock on the pipe. Oh, sure. I'm going to pull this over because I have my... Onto the concepts. Is it okay if I keep going? You know, we actually tried that, and I really apologize for that because I know those of you in the last 3 rows kind of have to do one of these just to be able to see the bottom of it. The PowerPoint is going to be available on a Park Service website. Nick probably should have coordinated this beforehand, but I did change the photos, so we'll have to send you a second. Sorry about that. The project need, one of the very first things we have to do in engineering is define the problem before we can define the solution. All the problems in these parks really fall into these 4 asset categories: pipes, manholes, exposed pipes, and then the storm drain inlets and outlets. It just so happens that the top 2, pipes and manholes, have very similar solutions, and the bottom 2 also have very similar solutions. So what we'll do is we'll talk about these first 2, pipes and manholes, and then at the end we'll have a couple slides on concepts for repairing exposed pipes and storm drain inlets, outlets. So this is our list. It's a very comprehensive and thorough list of all the different concepts we've developed. I'll run down it real quick. We're only going to talk about those top 3, just in the interest of time. The reason we're not going to talk about the rest, I'll run down those real quick. Abandoned storm drain piping. That one is not being talked about tonight, really primarily because it focuses more on Glover from Massachusetts south. As far as soapstone goes, there's the open stream already, and there's not a parallel storm drain running down, so it really doesn't affect ANC 3F. But the gist of that alternative is there's an existing storm drain pipe and an existing sanitary pipe and an empty stream. Well, we don't really need a storm drain pipe if we have a stream. It ends up proving to be not very feasible, or I should say at least very impactful, because with the volume of flow that comes down, it would be very erosive. And in order for that stream to convey flow, we would really have to rebuild the entire stream, which would disturb a significant number of trees, which will, well, we won't be talking about it later actually. But when you get the EA, it'll be thoroughly described in that. So another one we won't be talking about tonight is trenchless new construction and slip lining. The only reason I'm not talking about those because the impacts from this third one are very, very similar. Trenchless new construction is microtunneling, PTMT auger boring. These are basically, if you follow the news, the Lady Bird Tunnel that is currently drilling up the Potomac and will be going up the Anacostia. It's a very similar technology, it's on a smaller scale, obviously. It's a tunnel that's drilling underneath the ground. Slip lining is just where we take the old pipe and we take a smaller pipe and we just slip it through. The problem with that one is the pipe is a certain size for a reason, and the new pipe would not have as much capacity. Open cut replacement in the park. This is where we won't, but under this is where we would go in with full-size track hose, dig a giant hole. It's 40 or 50 feet wide, and it would be a disaster. Nobody wants that. I know Nick doesn't want it. We don't want it. So we're not going to spend any time talking about that tonight. Oh, whoops. Aerial crossings and siphons are really just a method. They're something that come up at various points in time. I'm going to set set the microphone down. Maybe I do need the mic stand. If you've got a road here and a stream here, and this road has a sewer in it, and you've got a road over here that has another sewer in it, and those two need to be connected, you either have to go under the stream or you have to cross over the top of it. An aerial crossing allows us to cross over the top of it. When you're in the stream, appears. We're not going to spend much time talking about that tonight. Installing siphons works just like the P-trap under your sink. If you can imagine, for those of you who have had to clean out the P-trap on your sink, that's clean water. This is not. We don't like these. They clog very quickly. They do work. We do have them. None where they would work on either Glover or soapstone have enough flow to keep everything moving. And then, of course, a combination of all the above. So first, I'll hit each of those three with the stars. First, fully removing the pipe from the park. Imagine you're looking down from a helicopter down, and instead of seeing streets, you've got X-ray vision, and you can see down through to the pipes. This is a schematic, so to speak. Awesome. A schematic. So for Glover Park, for example, imagine that this is Nebraska and this is Wisconsin, and that's the pipe flowing down Glover Park. In Soapstone's case, this would be the one running down Soapstone, and this would be a kind of a combination of Connecticut and everything on the south side. This would be a combination of Albemarle and Audubon Terrace, for example. So we've got flow coming from all these houses, and each one of these lines has, for example, a house, or 10 houses, or a retail, anything on it that produces wastewater, sewer that gets into the system. In order to remove that line from the park, we have to reroute it. Well, that one no longer has flow in it. The tributary sewers coming into it, they have to be rerouted. That one doesn't have any more in it now. The next ones, they have to be rerouted out, and so on. And that's how we get rid of the pipe in the park. This, of course, necessitates potentially upsizing pipes outside of the park. The biggest single problem with this is water flows downhill, of course. So the homes that are closest to the park drain into a sewer that is, on average, 10 or 12 or 15 feet deep. If we do this without a pump station, we'll get to pump stations in a minute, but without a pump station, That's flowing by gravity, and they get very deep very quickly. For this project, we're talking on the order of 80 feet. The maximums are 80 feet. Several of these would end up at 40, 50, 60 feet deep. To give you a scale, most sewers are 12 or 15 feet deep. 20 is a common maximum. Imagine digging a 20-foot deep hole in Connecticut Avenue is a way of thinking about it. So what we have here, this is a contour map of soapstone. The red and orange are higher in elevation. The green and yellow are lower in elevation. All the black lines are sewer lines. Connecticut Avenue, Albemarle, there's Audubon Terrace running right through there. Broad Branch over here. If we want to intercept this flow before it gets down in the park, we would have to run it this way, and it would have to cross over that high point. If you connect all these red and orange layers, you see a C-shaped or a horseshoe-shaped point of high elevation. For every sewer that we want to reroute out of the park, we have to get through that hill. For example, this apartment complex back here, or building I should say, I don't know if it's apartments or condos, but it's got a sewer line coming down. If we were to reroute that out, it would have to come out that driveway, and by the time it's going uphill, by the time it gets to that high point, that one is one of the worst ones. That's about 80 feet deep without a pump station. So I'll get to pump stations in a minute. So the primary issues with fully removing the pipe from park by gravity are excessive depth up to 80 feet in locations. 23 tributary sewers have the same problems. That's Glover and Soapstone combined. Soapstone alone has 4 of them. And then road closures. We would impact Foxhall, probably the easternmost lane of Foxhall, from MacArthur to Canal. Probably a closure. It's not really work you can shut off during rush hour. Closer to home, at least for 3F, Connecticut and Albemarle would have a significant intersection impact. So
You're mixing the two projects.
I am.
Couldn't you just, I think it'd be better if
I can do that.
the road closures, are all 3 of them for Soapstone or only the last?
Only the last one. Yep. Sure. That's and I might slip on that, so maybe help me a little bit. Yeah. So on to a new pump station. I was describing how the sewer's flowing the wrong direction and it just gets real deep real quick. We can't always just push it up the hill using a pump station. For the flows that are on these projects, it would require a full-size pump station, one mainline pump station, and then several smaller ones. To give you an idea of what this pump station would look like, it's when it's finished, it would take kind of a quarter acre or so. It's going to have a building that's a couple thousand square feet. It's going to have generators, electrical equipment. It's going to have maintenance crews come in and going. It's always going to have some construction equipment, some bypass. Oh, and vents, right. This would be a new pump station. So if you look at Soapstone, where you put pump stations, they've got to be close to the sewer line, and you need to put them. It's a building, so it's got to be on a relatively flat piece of land that is a quarter acre or so for the final product. But we also need another quarter acre or so to just to build it. There's no quarter acre lots around here, so it's a problem. So issues with pump stations: location, location, location. The permanent footprint, the carbon footprint. So this pump runs on electricity. So it would use 46 kilowatts, which is equivalent to a small mid-sized sedan at highway speeds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, into perpetuity. So there's a carbon footprint to consider. The number one complaint that we'll get from you all would be noise and odors. Aesthetics will be a distant third, but it's always third. And then the permanent footprint, which we talked about a bit. The smaller pump stations, they really only need a 40 by 40 footprint, permanent. There another 40 by 40 again on the side for temporary construction. Vents, equipment. There's going to be a storage shed looking thing for electrical equipment. and a 30-foot deep wet well that's going to collect all the flow, and the pumps will be in the bottom of that, and they'll kick on a couple times a day and pump everything out. Well, yeah, there's about 20 feeder lines, so each one would need one. Yeah. Along in this area, no. So, what's that? Oh, well, there's backup generators on site. So there would be a concrete pad, and there would be a concrete generator sitting on that concrete pad. The size of that for this is going to be kind of the size of one of those new Fiats or smart car, kind of about that size. Yeah, absolutely. It's a diesel generator. 4. That's correct. I'm sorry, what? What's that? Well, actually, we'll get that to the end. Right now, everything works by gravity, so everything's going into pipes that all flow downhill and eventually collect the same place the streams collect. Well, it's all we're running through the different concepts. So if you don't like the pump station, that's why we're here. To be honest, is to hear feedback on the different concepts. It's this list right here. Thank you. Trenchless lining and coating. So this is I've got another handy dandy visual display here. I'm sorry, I've moved to this is the starting of the third one now. The first one was fully removing the pipe from the park via excavation. The second one was focusing on fully removing the pipe from the park via pump stations. This is a third one, leaving it in its current place and rehabilitating it using this really cool stuff that I'm about to show you. Is it okay if I move on?
Was removing pipes and not installing anything.
Well, we'd be installing new pipes.
New pipes.
Yep.
The second one is
Installing new
stations.
pipes and new pump stations.
Well,
okay.
isn't it fair to say that the first alternative is not technically feasible because we could not put in 80-foot deep sewers and manholes?
I would say that, yes.
So it's not a real alternative.
It is not a real alternative, no.
I think one of the important things to realize too is the bottom one on the list is a combination of all the above. We'll be one of our next activities is to start slicing and dicing these.
If this land was not owned by the National Park Service,
If what?
if the issue were, if this land that we're talking about, these parks, was not part of the National Park Service, they were city parks, would that clarify the solution for
You know, even we've got projects in parks similar to Soapstone. Branch is a good example. It's Department of Parks and Recreation. We're looking at similar kinds of issues. I mean, we don't end up publishing an EA, but we look at similar kinds of issues. If it were in a street, we do this day in and day out.
So really, what's stopping right now you from going with the trenchless lining and coating?
Well, Will is going to let Will explain.
The federal law, I mean, in the crassest terms, federal law requires that we look at alternatives.
Okay.
It's on federal land. We have
That's
NEPA
important to
requires
know. Okay.
that
That's
we look at
important to
alternatives.
understand why you go through these studies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so my handy dandy demonstration. So pretend this is an existing pipe. And we have here a small cut from, just imagine a tube sock. And it's when you blow it up, it's somewhat circular. It's just felt, nothing fancy. We saturate it with resin. We pull it inside this pipe. It can be pulled, it can be inverted. There's a few different kind of technical ways of doing it. But you pull it through, and you can see how it's inside of there. It's not circular. We put it under pressure. It's now circular. It's got resin in there. We heat it up. It cooks, and that's where the name of the product comes from, cured in-place pipe. So when we finish with this liner, it actually looks like what's already in here. The outside of this is just traditional PVC. What's on the inside of that is white cured in-place pipe liner. So this new pipe on the inside has all the structural strength of the one on the outside. But we did it without excavation, via access still though at every single manhole. So imagine, especially soapstone, especially the east half past the end of Audubon Terrace, each one of those manholes has to have construction equipment at it. So even this option still has significant impacts. So on this list, there's no real good choice. I mean, there's not a favorite. There's not a silver bullet on this list. So one of the things that we've done is this usually requires a corridor of about 20 feet wide. It's got trucks that range in the size from large dump trucks to the biggest U-Haul you can rent that have to drive along and up to each manhole. One of the things we've done is we've talked to specialty contractors. There's 2 of them out there with slightly different technologies that can fit into a smaller space. You see those pallets in there. This contractor has built their technology in a way that it can be picked up on bobcats and smaller equipment and maneuvered in. So the manhole is actually back behind here, and you can see that footprint. That's much smaller than a traditional U-Haul plus a garbage truck. Something we have to pay attention to, especially with the trees, is vertical clearance. We do need vertical clearance. So even if we're close to a large tree, we have to pay attention to overhanging branches. The single most biggest comment we've been getting is trees, 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 and then some more trees and then more trees. So I put this figure in here. It requires a little bit of explaining though. This is Albemarle. There's Connecticut. The trailhead is right over here. And everything inside this red is what we've delineated as a limit of disturbance for alternatives. All those green dots are trees that are greater than 18 inches. So this is even still a small percentage of the total number of trees inside that limits of disturbance. Something very important to clarify, this is not a clear cut. We're not planning on ripping out 4,000 trees and just plowing them down. This is the number of trees within the limits of disturbance for all the different alternatives. You can see there's a lot of green dots. Absolutely. Very important point.
Trees and impact as possible. What we believe, so that swath that we've looked at, identifying all those special trees, just considers the area that we could work within, okay? When it comes down to it though, we would pick as meandering as avoiding, but still the impact. So the impact of this one is not really the technology. You're working from manhole to manhole internally, but it's the space that you need around the manhole for the trucks, the curing and so on. But it's mainly getting to the manholes, creating the construction access to reach them. So again, we have drastically reduced by meeting with every representative of companies out there to bring what is the smallest equipment in the industry to reach these manholes. But still, so it's taking advantage of what's there, taking advantage of gravity. We would structurally rehabilitate the existing pipe to like-new condition, but it still has a heck of an impact.
So I can even double down a little bit on those impacts, because not only do we have impacts to the trees, but since that sanitary sewer line shut off all your sewer service, we have to take that flow and reroute it via temporary bypass pumping. So a few photos just to show kind of how that generally works. This is a bit bigger than what would be needed on this project, but it gets the point across. In this case, we cut into a pipe. In our case, we would be using a manhole. You can see here a plug in the end of the pipe. So flow is coming from here. It can no longer go down that pipe, so it's getting sucked up through that pump intake. There's a couple of pumps. We'd always have two for backup in case of failure. Usually the most common failure is running out of diesel fuel. They're manifolded, piped across wherever they need to be. You can see in this case we didn't have trees to worry about. And then dropped back into a manhole downstream of where they're working. Another impact related to trenchless lining and coating is if you imagine this pipe still having debris, rocks, other stuff sitting in the bottom of the pipe, that pipe is not going to inflate, it's not going to be circular. Instead of lasting decades like we need it to, it will last days or weeks. So the pipe has to be cleaned. The way we normally do this is we use a big jet vac truck that has a reach of typically 600 feet. It can go 1,200 or 1,500, but it doesn't get the pipe quite as clean. This is, again, larger than a garbage truck, a little bit smaller than the largest U-Haul you can rent. The pictures up here are a technology that we really like. They set this up, and they run water through the pipe and run it through the pipe, and they circulate it back, and they run it through, and they get more and more water, and it goes faster and faster, and basically that water gets going so fast that it scours everything out, and that then cleans the pipe from much greater distances. We can get up to 5,000, 6,000 feet in one shot. The problem with this technology is it's generally done in large diameters, 36-inch and greater. We've talked to the contractors. We're pretty confident it can be done in our sizes. We think this can be done. It's definitely pushing the limits of the technology. So this would have to be parked in Albemarle. This would be parked on Broad Branch. It's got to be pretty close. That's a good. It's going to be on the order of days. A week or two kind of thing. No, the pipe would never be completely full anyway, so even if it is, it's only going to have 5 or 10 feet of head on it, and the pipes will withstand that pretty well. The more normal concern actually would be scouring, because you got that grit and everything grinding along the edge of that pipe. These are clay pipes, and they won't scour. If it were concrete, we'd have a different issue. So we're actually really close. So that is the different concepts for the pipes and manholes. Now onto the exposed pipe and the storm drain inlets, outlets. The list of concepts for those. Obviously, we can relocate the pipe away from the stream, and it's no longer exposed in the pipe in the stream. It would still be there. We'd have to abandon it. We'd have to figure that out. But the active one would no longer be in the stream. There's about 9.
encased by the stream bank, but because of, greater urban stormwater flow and erosion, they are now looking like those smokestacks or those exposed just beams of pipe, and they need to be protected. So you got about 6 of them and a variety of smokestack-like mantles that have to be.
So, and as a point of just a quick meeting logistics, I'm about 4 minutes past what I want to be, because we want to still get that full half an hour for questions. So we are actually real close to the end, so I'm going to get through
How
this.
many do we have in Glover Archibald?
Let him finish.
Half a dozen. Lowering the pipe, installing the pump station, installing siphons, and installing all the same things we've already talked about. Hard armoring the stream. When we talk about hard armoring, we're talking about riprap and concrete, not the most aesthetically pleasing. Installing cross veins, I'll show you a photograph of that. This is an existing sewer pipe, or before, and this is after. It's flowing from here that way, and you see that pool right there is causing erosion out from underneath the pipe. Sooner or later, that pipe was just going to roll into the stream, and you'd have a direct discharge of raw wastewater into the stream. Here, we took these boulders, and we built a, I shouldn't say we, this was a photo I took before I joined DC Water, but nonetheless. You take a boulder wall, and it's dropping over this, and you see all that turbulence right there, all that white water. That's the energy dissipating, and it's dissipating in the center of the stream, so the stream isn't going to meander, and there is a large boulder underneath there that's preventing it from eroding down. So all the erosion at this location is contained, well, it's prevented, really. That pipe is running back underneath here. So this is a good way of protecting pipes from erosion.
Down to the stream.
And we're talking 1-ton, 2-ton boulders.
Yes.
For the under, the bigger, I haven't got those yet. But, so here are a few other pictures of what they might look like. Worth noting, they can be designed for fish passage. The list of all the different concepts. Important to note, we've not yet made a decision.
When will you?
That's an excellent question.
I think the answer is we're a long way off from it.
Well, but I do want to emphasize that again, with closed circuit TV inspection, we have by and large internally inspected about 90% of these pipes. In our judgment, there are pipes that need to be rehabilitated. We cannot draw out the process to the degree we think that those pipes still have a couple of years remaining in terms of internal condition until we're at the point of failure. There's nothing that we have to run in right today and say stop the discharge. But on those manholes and those pipes that are exposed, at any moment, all you need is a tree to fall on the manhole, a tree to fall on the exposed pipe, a tree to come down, not to mention the other things. That could happen tonight. It could.
What's your optimal date to start this
2 years
project?
for construction.
Hmm?
To start construction, the most optimistic date is about 2 years out. Part of that is involving the timing of wanting to start in the right vegetative and migratory and species time of the year. So public input we've received to date, a lot of initial contact interest in a daylighting option. Haven't. Oh, so daylighting is where we abandon a storm drain pipe and put the water back in a natural stream, an existing stream. So again, this one doesn't really apply to soapstone. What we've heard most frequently is protect the trees. And one thing we've heard, not maybe as frequently, but maybe a little bit more loudly, is don't put a pump station next to my house. With that, we're at questions, comments. Hopefully, some of you have cards and have questions. What we'd like to do is gather the cards so we can kind of, there's going to be a lot of the same kinds of questions. So we'd like to gather cards. I'm not sure what the best way of doing that is.
Where are the cards?
Where are the cards? That's an excellent question.
John, why don't you sort of direct the questions to us?
Okay, come run and collect them if you have them.
So I'm going to start over here and kind of work that way.
Manuel, you may want to.
Okay.
Do you have a?
What's the diameter of the soapstone?
Soapstone is 18 inches in diameter. Vitrified clay pipe.
What kind of clay?
Vitrified clay.
Hey, Manuel, give me what you have.
Clay.
Is it good? Is clay good?
I personally love clay. I think it's a great material. It's all natural. It doesn't corrode over time. It's got a good long-lasting life to it.
So I think if we can direct the question so everyone can hear, and John, if you would take care of it.
You want to ask a question?
So here, let's start. This is about soapstone.
Does anybody need one?
Pipes, what is the diameter? Made of what material? Exactly where do they enter and what's the depth? Manholes, how many? I think you already answered that. So flows, how much sanitary sewage?
To add to that,
Can you repeat how many manholes?
We don't have any.
He's gonna.
We have questions.
We know you have questions, which is why we asked you to fill out the forms. Because
there's an advantage.
Everybody in the room has questions. And
And you have our information there so you can respond to our questions via that form.
We-
But right now we have some questions.
I understand, which is that's what I'm reading. It's a question that somebody has written down and never around. So, and I'll tell you why we're doing that, and it is we feel that that's a much better use of our time to answer questions instead of having people shout them out. If the questions are in front of us. Okay. Well, we'll accommodate that, and we'll be here afterwards as well to address any that we don't get to. So, if you could start with that, Will, and we'll.
So the question was size, 18-inch vitrified clay, number of manholes. I don't recall off the top of my head. It seems like it's 40 or 60 in that neighborhood. 60 for soapstone. The total footage in soapstone is about 4,000 feet. What else is in there? Where is it coming from? It's all coming from along Connecticut on the east side of Connecticut, draining back in, and then from Audubon Terrace, and from the south half of Albemarle.
So, actually, I'll hand this to you. So these are the second
Flows.
part.
I have to admit, I don't know the flow rate in the pipe. I should know that, but I don't. I have to apologize for that. Are we considering helicopter delivery by equipment? We've actually talked about this. It's not the first time it's come up. One of that has been done in places. We would need an opening through the trees, which doesn't currently exist. Another technology. Well, yeah.
I want to mention something else as a matter of practicality. Sewers have to be maintained, okay? They have to be cleaned. It could be that the Clean Water Act or some regulatory mandate will put these sewers on a mandated frequency cycle for cleaning. We need to get to the sewers. To think that we could achieve this by helicopter is really assuming that we don't have to get to them for maintaining them, which in my opinion is not a responsible approach. They are infrastructure now. Another thing that I want to point out to you, we are already under a permit requirement. The city is. Some of you may know of it, the MS4 permit. So it is the municipal separate sanitary sewer system permit. And that permit that we share responsibility with the Department of Environment requires, for example, that those storm outfalls that are taking storm flow from the street to avoid the streets from flooding and efficiently, unfortunately, delivering it to the stream. We are under now permit requirement to create a schedule for repairing the inventory of these outfalls over the next 10-year period. How many outfalls are there within soapstone that we have to repair?
Half a dozen, 4 or 5.
Okay,
in there.
so even if we were to do some helicopter maneuvering. We've got to get to these things. And we have to, by permit, repair those outfalls. So I'm throwing that out. You know, typically for any major sewer of this size, you would have regular access. We don't want to be in a situation where every time we have to get to the pipe. Again, I'm just being realistic. I could avoid, I want you to understand.
Are you going to extend the public hearing time until from August 19th? Are you going to extend it to
There is, all we're saying at this point, there is
there's a deadline right now,
there is
so
no
we want to know if
deadline.
you're gonna.
No.
That's what you guys are saying. That's
No,
what it is on the
no,
law.
She changed it in the beginning.
Okay.
What we're saying is, in order to move the process along, we would appreciate your thoughts on what we've told you here by a date we can aim for, which is mid-August, okay? The comment period, we're still in exploratory concept development stages. There will be many periods for, at some point, if an EA or an EIS is developed, there will be a regulatory 60-day or whatever comment period. We're just saying, please, to move the process along and to understand the various thoughts.
All right, let's,
Yeah.
let's get through as many of these as we can.
One of the questions was about maps. There will be maps in a draft EA, or EIS, I should say. I can't keep saying EA. The question is are there going to be maps provided? And there will be maps attached to a draft document.
Draft document.
Yes, answer the next one.
You're asking,
The
When
next
will that be
question.
available?
Yeah, we're aiming for 6 to 12 months. That's a bit optimistic. I mean, we've got a lot of work to get there. A lot of work to do to get there. The next question: there's a bad odor in soapstone. One of the things that we can do to address that is there's actually chemical, imagine a salt lick or a guinea pig feeder that can hang from the bottom of a manhole, and the rate at which that degrades can tell us how much, can quantify the odors actually that are coming out of the manholes. And one of the things that we could do, to be honest, it's not part of the project, so if that's an interested part, we should hear that as a comment so we can know to add it to the project. And what we would do then is we would be able to design a system for managing that odor that is coming out of those manholes. Next question, can access roads?
Excuse me, that
Yeah.
was actually my question.
Okay,
So if you're gonna do this project and not fix that problem, I hike that trail regularly.
yep,
And it's atrocious, it's like a third world country.
Yep.
So that is a problem, and I hope it makes it as part of the project.
Renovate the trails the same time as they do where they're adjacent to the pipes, so that they go on the trails at the same time.
well, so for most of this, the trail happens to be the kind of the best mode for access. So assuming we're driving in there with equipment, we would want to be using those trails and widening them, and we have to restore anything that we've damaged. And in fact, this next question is about that. Can the access road be temporary? Can a gravel road, can it be a gravel road rather than pavement? The material that actually has the least impact is wood chips with wood planks on top of it. And the wood chips would be on the order of 6 inches or a foot thick. And what that does is it helps distribute the load of the construction equipment so it doesn't compact tree roots. One of the things, if we have this equipment driving back and forth over the tree roots, that'll kill a tree just as quick as chopping off all the branches. So we do have to pay attention to that.
and the park would be involved in specifying that. I'm sure you have requirements, and we would follow that would most likely be part of a permit for the project. And
The next
yeah.
The next question is about daylighting again in Foundry and Glover. It's asking about where it would be. That's just something we just don't know at this time. What we're doing after this public scoping and we hear comments and concerns about all the different technologies, we'll start putting together alternatives that would be a cohesive design to fix all the problems.
You have another one? If you have I got others. It's about Glover.
What might happen to Glover Park Community Garden? What might happen to the Glover Park Community Garden? So
This is about the Glover Archibald.
So there's a whole range. It could be absolutely nothing. Honestly, I kind of believe it's nothing, but I mean, under a pump station alternative, it's a large flat piece of land next to the sewer line. That would be kind of disastrous in my personal opinion. Well, that's a good point. It's not all that flat. It's
It would be after they're done.
please address horizontal drilling as an option.
Read it out.
The question is, please address horizontal drilling as an option. Horizontal drilling is one of those trenchless new construction technologies. It's related to microtunneling, which is, just imagine a drill bit. It just happens to be 3 feet in diameter and can go hundreds of feet. Horizontal drilling versus microtunneling versus auger boring, they're all different technologies. As far as what you would see in the field, they're very similar. What you see on the surface is very similar. With the difference gets to the different kinds of soils that are underneath there. So engineering geeks like myself say, if it's boulders and cobbles, we need one of these. If it's sands, we need one of these. If it's got high groundwater, we need one of these. If it's got low groundwater, then we change it back and forth. So trenchless new construction is definitely one of the concepts we're looking at.
Well, if you did that in soapstone, would you need a pump station?
For the west half of Soapstone, if we were to do a microtunnel, it would catch the smaller sewers on the Connecticut side. It would route up Albemarle, and then, I mean, the best option would be along the trail from Albemarle to Audubon Terrace, and that would eliminate the need for a pump station. That would only remove the pipe from the west third or half of the park. Question, life expectancy of different options. Cured in place pipe has it's actually kind of a good question from a technical standpoint. There's a bit of a debate in the industry, but we plan on it really being about 50 years for a cured in place pipe.
What do you do after 50 years?
I'm one of the young. I won't even be here. Now, in sincerity, I mean, pipe can only last so long. It's just like a car. Everything has a useful life. We can't build anything that is going to last forever.
That means the 1908 technology is better than what we have today?
Clay pipe is a very sturdy pipe. It's well beyond what you would have planned for it to have lived. Yeah. How decide quality of trees versus quantity?
So that's my question.
Yeah.
There was talk about 18-inch trees, and you could take a different path to reduce the impact on the larger trees, but are two 17-inch trees worth more than an 18-inch tree? How do you guys work that out?
To be honest, that's a detail that we're going to probably spend a lot of time talking about. I don't know that we know the answer to that.
A lot of discussion on.
I mean, one thing that the parks will require of us, and I'll let Nick correct me if I'm wrong, but an inch-for-inch replacement. If we do have to fully cut down an 18-inch tree, that's 9 2-inch trees that we have to plant back in its replacement. And then there's also a mitigation fee that would be on top of that. So that's a lot of detail that we're a little ways away from still.
You'll have to explain that one to me.
Relationship of HDD to recoding and relighting. HDD HDD is horizontal directional drilling. It is another one of these trenchless new constructions like microtunneling or auger boring. It goes where there is no existing pipe. Recoding and relining has to have an existing pipe. So the HDD can chart a new path through the soil. What happens to sewage when a smaller pump fails? Well, we've got backup generators on site to prevent overflows, but in theory, if both of them were to fail, it would be a sewer overflow.
I mean, it's an electric motor, the submergible pump.
It is.
So if it fails, what happens?
If the backup generator doesn't, well, there's 2 pumps down in there, and you only need one of them. They're designed for backup. There's redundancy in these things. These small pump stations, there's thousands and hundreds of them all over the country.
Second.
And then the second one?
When would the sewage pump from Glover feeders, where would the sewage pump from Glover feeders go to? You know, Glover has a particular problem in that the high points are Wisconsin and Nebraska, so in order to reroute that away, you've got to reroute a lot of neighborhood away. From Soapstone, that's a little, there's not really a good answer on Soapstone. I mean, Soapstone, it would have to get up to Albemarle and still be pushed up even higher to get over the hump past Linnaean, and then from there it would go downhill. On the other side of Soapstone, it would have to get past Van Ness or so. There's a high point there as well.
Drainage, where do you have to pump it to? If you use pumps.
Well, everything eventually, at least in this watershed, is getting to the Potomac pump station, where 66 leaves the...
But if you're not going downhill and you're going uphill, where do you go?
Oh, well, you get to a high point, you cross over that high point, and then it's flowing down in another direction. So it's got to get up to Wisconsin and Nebraska, which are high points, and then it's going to flow in the watersheds on the other side of Wisconsin and Nebraska.
So you're going to need new sewer lines to get it up to the ridge with either Nebraska or Wisconsin.
So the pump station would reverse the current flow?
The direction,
reverse the direction?
Compass direction of it, yes.
Yeah, it would push it up toward Connecticut and down that way.
Toward Connecticut, well...
From
different
Soapstone.
Different projects. So we've hopped back to Soapstone now. So if there were a pump station near the intersection of Connecticut and Albemarle, the preferred route would either be straight out Albemarle or down Connecticut. Well, it's going to be down Albemarle.
And you would abandon the Soapstone pipe then?
Correct.
That wasn't clear in your explanation.
Is it clear now? Are we good?
Good now.
Budget issues normally limit alternatives. What is the cost of each alternative?
That's my question.
We've got costs that range from $2 million to $20 million, depending on different alternatives.
And what's the realistic budget allocation for this?
I don't remember.
We do not have I'm sorry, I don't have that information right with me, but that would have been developed, that budget estimate, prior to coming up with these various concepts. And but I think it's fair to say that certainly our budget doesn't allow for a $20 million option that would, we can report back to you on that.
Right, because you can't really talk about alternatives without putting a price tag. So we're here getting all kinds of descriptions of which way will the stream run, which way will the pipes run, how deep will they be lined, will they be unlined, will there be pumping stations? It's all in the abstract.
It is very much so.
I'm not criticizing you, I'm just saying this is so early.
It's true, it is.
And without budget figures, that we are shaken up, but we don't understand what the alternatives
I think the
really
thing
are.
to do is find the best solution and then talk about how much it costs.
There's kind of two public comment periods. Right now we're talking about scoping, which is different alternatives, and gathering input on that. The next one would be with a draft EA that would be published that would have alternatives, and that will have costing.
I didn't understand the acronyms you just
We
tried again.
we don't want to rule out any alternative at this point from consideration.
Well, that's by law.
Based on the cost. There will be, when we get all the feedback, we will be in an EA or an EIS evaluating the various alternatives that are still considered feasible, looking at the environmental impacts, and then we will be looking at the cost of those alternatives. That has an impact as well. You know, the funding of this project, of course, again, with an 89-year median age on the sewers, there are lots of them that need rehabilitation.
And is the funding from the district only, or does it come from the feds as well?
We don't envision at this point federal funding for this project. This would be funded by DC Water ratepayers.
Is this going to be handled on the pumping stations? Would they be subject to vandalism?
Absolutely, they would be subject. Pump stations can be subject to vandalism.
You want to decorator or whatever, someone come in and just.
It can happen. I mean, for vandalism that causes failure, it's got to be somebody who really knows what they're doing, and there's enough security in place to prevent I mean, if somebody really wants to get in.
Let's stick to the protocol. There's been the request that we stick to the.
There's a question about trees, number of trees. What we have for Glover Archbold is a count within the limits of disturbance. This is multiple alternatives combined, and
Worst case.
Worst case scenario, within the limits of disturbance, may or may not even be touched, 1,045. Within Glover, I don't have handy the number 6 inches and greater. I seem to recall that 4,000 is the right number.
Correct. That's
And then for soapstone, the number of special trees, again, 18 inches and larger is 194, and the number 6 inches and greater, 1,000. So that's a lot of trees.
But this isn't the number that are going to be cut. This is the number impacted in some way.
Not even necessarily impacted, just within the area that we need to work.
Yeah.
So a lot of those we can move around.
Yeah,
So in other
that's
words,
an important point.
for if we feel typically we would need quite a wide limit of disturbance for the kinds of, let's take something like slip lining or the cured in place lining. We're trying to narrow that access impact, and it'll be quite a challenge, and we're really pushing the envelope. But let's say that we can do this within 10 feet. Right now, we're looking at the full distance so that we could say what is the worst of that? What are all the trees that could be impacted within the limits of disturbance? And what is the width that is preliminarily, what's the count, Shamir, with it? Yeah, the width. How many? Yeah. 14 feet? Okay. And we would work within something smaller than that. But we're trying to count the trees, speciate the trees, etc., within the full width that could be impacted, let's say, to get to the manhole. And then within that width, we would consider what is the way to navigate to protect the resources to the degree that we could.
Next question is about where are the stormwater outfalls. So we have a map of soapstone. The black lines are the pipes. The big outfall is the one right there. There's a smaller one right there. There's the big one. Next one's right there. Number 3 is right there. That's draining off of 29th.
That's storm drain.
Yes, draining into the stream. And then the last one is coming down off of Lenore Lane.
Linear.
Is that
Lenore? That's Lenore.
Yeah, that's Lenore. Yeah.
I don't know the neighborhood as well as you all, sorry. Next question, will there be any improvement to the flow in the streams? It's eroding lots of trees within, when there is a storm. No. I think the question's trying to say, would we be doing anything that would reduce the amount of flow coming down from the storm drain?
Improve the flow
in the stream.
In the stream itself, right?
So nothing we're doing would change the flow in the stream.
Who asked that question? Does that answer it?
Well, actually, I should clarify. Under that daylight concept, there is the concept that's on our list where we would take either all, we couldn't take all, or some portion of flow from the storm drain and put it back in the stream.
But that's Glover.
And that's Glover only, thank you.
All right, let's get to a couple more, and then we'll be around to.
What about post-project roads? What is being considered along those lines? What footprint? We don't know an answer to that. Probably. Oh. Nick, do you want to answer
that issue just raised its head recently, so it's still up for discussion with the service, but that's nothing that we would encourage.
Sorry, what is nothing that?
A post-construction road.
For permanent access for cleaning and that kind of thing.
Because you wanted permanent access, didn't you?
I am advising that in my long years of doing this, that is typically a desirable. Now, was talk at the meeting that we had in the Glover community that You know, this could be a naturalized design of an access road, could be amenitized with educational features like in many parks, you know, things to read and trail maps, still maintained as a trail. So, you know, possible to be, but again, this is the park's property. And so in my judgment, and knowing what I do about the maintenance of the outfalls as required by permit and the trend in regulations, which is towards a mandated frequency of cleaning and inspecting sewers on a regular basis, we will have to assume that we don't, you know, to reforest, and then every time we need to get to it, have the input. That is a discussion that the various stakeholders need to have.
That was my question, so I just want to mention why. To me, I was surprised you didn't mention that the issue of post-project roads is at the very top of what you need to think about. When you're talking about a park, and you're talking about putting roads, that's the red flag for anyone who cares about parks. And this Glover Park, there was a huge fight in the 1960s to put a freeway up that far. They fought that back. We're not going to have roads going to our parks.
We, as DC Water, our goal is to rehab the sewers. We would never advocate if the idea of a permanent construction access is not something that is acceptable to the stakeholders. That is not part of this. The goal of the project, Will mentioned at the beginning, you know, the goal is to restore the structural integrity, to make sure that we don't have future overflows. The goal of the project is not permanent, access. I'm just bringing up the reality of the sewer needs to be accessed, and each time we have to access it. Hopefully it won't be for an emergency, but no, that is not a goal of the project, and you know, we're not here to advocate for that. Just again, pointing out some practical realities of the management of the sewer system.
So
try to get to a couple more.
Move on to who built the existing pipe 100 years ago, was the land NPS at the time. The pipe actually predates the Park Service, but I believe it was a park. Was it already designated as a national park? Before the Park Service? Is that?
You mean in Soapstone?
Correct.
No.
1908, and Park Service is 1917?
Yeah, 1916.
So at that point in time, it was all fed, we were all, oh, sorry, what?
No, it's just a little different. I mean, different sections of our big park were added at different times.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure exactly when Soapstone was added, my apologies.
For who built it, everything was federal government at the time. Another question about maps. Maps will be, when we publish maps, we want to have alternatives that we can show you. And that will come out with the draft EA. And that will include the location of the exposed pipes and the smokestack manholes. Can a main sewer line or branch come off Connecticut Avenue between existing commercial buildings to make the sewer replacement in the park less in distance than less destructive? That's on the table that we're looking at. It's definitely something that we're evaluating.
Can I just interject something here? My name is John Gray, and I'm with the southern end of this park.
Can you speak up a little, just a tad?
And we don't need to go back to 1968 as far as the rest of the park and roads go. We only need to go back a couple of years.
I was thinking the same thing, actually.
Okay, so the park is under enormous threat.
Yeah.
And Joe, is it President? It's not the National Park Service's property. It's our property. It's a U.S. park. And the Park Service, so one reason I'm here is I'm very concerned about protecting that park. And when Georgetown University proposed its campus plan, the Park Service did not do everything it could to protect the park. In fact, the opposite. So I think that maybe what some people are here about. And so it sounds like you're doing due diligence. I mean, it seems like a reasonable process that you're going forward. But I think a lot of people are concerned about, they talk about roads coming through the park. So there's a history here. There's a history here that you should be, a recent history you should be very cognizant of.
We appreciate that. We're gonna cut off the comments. We got to most of them, but I know there's.
How many overflows are occurring now?
Well,
Sanitary sewer overflow, 0.
so
Can I just make one request?
can we follow up with you afterwards, David?
No, I'd like to make it, I'd like the community to hear it and you to hear it. It seems to me, for us as a community, to intelligently deal with the issues that are bothering you, you should tell us, even if you don't give us the maps for 6 months, what houses and buildings producing this sanitary sewage are served by these 4 lines, and how much is flowing into each of the 4 lines from this collection of houses and buildings. Then we as a community can cope with some of these issues much more intelligently.
So I can actually answer that on Soapstone on this map. Everything inside this C, everything in from
Inside the sea.
I mean, if you take this shape, everything inside that is draining down to Albemarle. That's not necessarily homes that would be directly impacted, but those are homes, apartments, condos, businesses inside this area that are draining into Soapstone. Glover Park, it's basically everything between Wisconsin and Nebraska.
But you show Albemarle going all the way to Broad Branch. Isn't that
That's
sewer?
well, that's the sewer line. So there is a sewer line at the end of Albemarle that drops off the hill there and connects it. We've got a large line in Broad Branch that connects into that.
So those houses aren't going into Soapstone, they're going into Broad Branch.
Well,
It's not the same sea.
There's a detail in here that you can't see. All these homes are draining into this line, which is coming down here. This line is connecting these.
Put it this way, if you want to do it by a map, do it by a map, if not by a list. But I think we need to know that, and I think we need to know how many gallons in each of the 4 lines that are bothering you, because maybe the answer is one thing for one of them and another thing for another. We can't comment unless we have the facts.
All right. We really want to thank all of you for coming. We'll be here for a few minutes if your question didn't get answered. Also, if you gave us your contact information and you had a question on these sheets, we'll get answers to you by email for those. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it.